Thank you. Can you hear me, Mr. Wendler?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Going back to something that you said before the break, where you said that you had a partnership with Varsity Spirit. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Okay. It's true that in your contract with Varsity Spirit that FloSports actually does the production of the events, correct?
That is not correct. They produce most of the biggest events. We produce a few beyond that.
Okay, and by produce, what do you mean? What I was using the term to mean, just to make sure we're on the same page, is the filming, editing, production of the actual broadcast. Is that right? Is that your?
Yes, they produce most of the big events, and then we produce the smaller events beyond that.
Okay.
And
you
I want to instruct my client that I need to instruct my client that if anything's going to be something that's not public information, just remember that you are on the internet, and
yeah, sorry.
And so if you need to ask to not respond without being.
That contract does have a confidentiality clause, so probably should not talk about the specifics.
Okay, I don't believe that this is a question that relates to the contract, but on your website, FloSports also provides non-event content related to that channel, correct?
Correct. We provide it, and they provide some as well.
Now, we've had testimony about the PIIA that Mr. Saylor signed that you testified to earlier. You recall that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Hank, could you put that exhibit back on the screen? Let me know if you need the exhibit number. Okay, it looks like you don't. Okay, so.
I need the exhibit number.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The court reporter needs the exhibit number 2.
F160.
Mr. Brutico?
F160, Your Honor, sorry. Now, this is the PIIA that Mr. Saylor signed, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Now, you testified that you signed a PIIA with FloSports as well, correct?
Correct.
When did you sign yours?
I don't know the exact date.
Was it around the same time that you testified around the Series A financing?
I don't know the exact date.
I wasn't asking the exact date.
I don't recall if it was, it was within probably a year of that, yes.
Okay. When Martin Floriani was still the CEO of FloSports, correct?
Correct.
Now, does your PIIA have the same language as in this exhibit F160?
I recall that I may have negotiated some of the language.
Your PIIA that you negotiated does not have a non-compete, does it?
Oh, it does.
That you signed back in the day when Mr. Floriani was CEO, that time frame?
Yes.
What is the difference between your non-compete and Mr. Saylor's, if any?
I can't speak to that. I have not compared the two documents.
You know if your non-compete mentions the sports video industry?
I believe it does. But for the record, my document has been updated since the original one that I've signed.
Okay. So originally, when you signed a PIIA, is it true that you did not have a non-compete?
No, I don't believe so.
You don't believe that's correct? You believe that it did have a non-compete? Is that your testimony?
So there was a time when I was on the ad sales and working externally, didn't have access to a lot of the proprietary information of the company, that I don't even know if I had a signed non-compete. when I moved into the rights acquisition role and moved down to Austin in, that would be 2015, I think July or August, I had signed a document that had very similar, if not the same clauses regarding non-compete and proprietary information.
Okay, so, but you just don't remember if it included a prohibition on providing products and services in the sports video industry. Is that correct?
My recollection is that it definitely prohibited that.
Okay, okay. And I believe that you testified what sports video industry meant in your direct exam. I was wondering if there's any non-privileged documents within FloSports that employees can consult in terms of what sports video industry actually means.
I'm going to object to asking this witness all of FloSports content.
I don't understand the question to call for that. I think he's just asking you if that definition appears someplace in a document he's familiar with, it's not privileged or confidential. So to the extent that you have an objection, it's overruled.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. Is there any non-privileged document at FloSports that employees can consult that defines sports video industry?
I can't say that I'm aware of one.
Okay, now, if the term sports video industry in the PIIA was taken out, okay, this is a hypothetical. If the term sports video industry was taken out and in its place was put in the word, any word, would that change the scope of the non-compete in your mind?
I believe the non-compete states that you know, whatever your job function was, especially at the time of departure, that you would be prohibited from doing that exact function in a competitive manner or with a competitive company for the time period of a year. So you should, yes.
Okay, if you could go to, Hank, go to page 2 of this exhibit, please. Page 3 of this exhibit, under section 3.1b. Are you thinking of this language, Mr. Wendler? Or are you talking about another agreement that you may have signed?
I'm talking about this clause, yes.
Okay, and what specifically in this clause are you referring to when you say specifically what you did?
It would be, I think, Roman numeral 3.
Okay, and you understand that there are other sections in the agreement as well, correct?
I do.
Okay, so you understand that the word competitor is defined by whether you are in a certain business with a capital B. Do you understand that?
Mm-hmm.
And we can go to the page if you need it, but do you understand that the definition of business in turn is defined as defining products and services in the sports video industry? Would you like to look at that?
I don't need to look at it, no.
So can you confirm that that's a correct statement, that business is defined as products and services in the sports video industry?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but that seems to be what it means.
Okay, so if the term sports video industry was changed to something else, products and services in, and then you just had a different word, would you agree with me that that would change the definition of what this agreement would prevent you from doing?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Would it change what our business is?
What this agreement in section 3B prevented you from doing when you left FloSports?
I don't know. I don't know if I haven't studied the document from a legal perspective long enough or conferred with lawyers. So I don't feel comfortable answering that, yes or no.
Well, okay. If Mr. Machuca testified that FloSports could have substituted the phrase sports video industry and instead used the word onion, it wouldn't have changed the definition of what you're prohibited from doing. Would you agree with that?
I don't know. I don't have the full context of what the questions were.
Would you agree that sports video industry is susceptible to more than one interpretation?
I'm
It's
gonna
any-
object to the extent that calls for a legal conclusion.
I think he's asking about his own interpretation or interpretations, if applicable, not a legal interpretation, just whether or not if a layperson reading it might reach some different understanding or not.
I don't know if I want to speculate on what a layperson reading it would how they
He's
would-
asking about you, whether or not you can see one or more ways in which that language might be understood. That's what he's just asking about, your own reading of it, not someone else's.
Thank you, Your Honor. You know, if you're reading it, if I'm reading it with the context of working at FloSports, it seems pretty clear to refer to our business in the FloSports media industry.
I'm going to object as not responsive and ask if you believe that it is susceptible to more than one interpretation, the term sports video industry.
By the witness, not by others. He can't speculate as to whether or not somebody else might read it differently, just whether or not he could read that same sentence and think, well, you know, it might mean this, or I guess I could see it could also mean that. He's asking about what you think about that document, not what other people might think about it.
I think the document is very clear that it's talking about the sports media industry.
You believe it's clear that it's talking about the sports media industry, correct? Is that what you said?
Correct.
And you don't distinguish between the sports video industry and the sports media industry?
No, those words like that in our business are mixed up all the time. And it's the definitions, the product and services of the video industry, which content is a product of. And so that's why we have invested in folks like Willie Saylor. We're not just limited to video.
Would you at least admit, Mr. Wendler, that the terms media and video are not synonymous?
Video is a type of media. So yeah, you could say that they're not synonymous, but I would say that they mean similar things in our industry.
Media is broader than video, isn't it? This is not a difficult question. The media is broader than video, correct?
Again, yes.
Okay. Before Mr. Floriani left FloSports, Mr. Wendler, do you recall that he had a discussion with you about your job duties?
Pardon, about my job, what?
Duties?
Martin was my boss, so we had daily conversations about my job duties.
Okay, and he demoted you before he left out of the lead role for global rights acquisition, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah. Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Soltero, you need not wait. In fact, none of you do. When the witness is passed by one lawyer, the other next in order may simply start the questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, Mr. Wendler, is lifetime value of a subscriber a fixed number like the formula for Coca-Cola, or does it change?
I don't know about the formula of Coca-Cola, but lifetime value can change.
Well, in fact, doesn't it change all the time?
It can change. It doesn't always change.
Okay. Does it change monthly and quarterly?
It can, but it doesn't have to.
Has it changed yearly?
I don't know which specific LTV you're referring to.
Okay. Is the LTV today different than what it was in 2013?
Can you clarify what LTV you're talking about?
Any LTV that you would seek to apply to my client, to any subscriber associated to my client.
I don't, I'm not, I mean, I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
Sure. Is that just an area that you don't have familiarity with, is the lifetime value and how that's calculated?
I understand lifetime value. I understand how it's calculated. But I'm not, I haven't, personally, I have not applied it to Willie Saylor, so I don't understand the question.
Okay. And, but you would agree with me that it changes all the time?
I would not, I would say that it can change all the time. It doesn't mean it will change all the time.
Okay. And factually, can you tell us one way or another whether it has or has not changed since October of 2019? Maybe you can't tell us. That's
You
fine.
have to be more specific. Oh, I don't know which LTV you're talking about. I'm not trying to be difficult. Are you talking about a specific cohort of subscribers or our overall subscribers?
I'm talking about any LTV that you or your company would try to impose as some element to try to take money from my client.
I still don't, I mean,
That's
I
fine.
don't think I'm the right subject, right person to answer that question.
We'll move on. Is NHSCA still under contract with FloSports?
Yes,
And it's true that there's been absolutely no break in that long-term contract between FloSports and NHSCA since before 2019, true?
yes, I believe that's accurate.
Okay. Ms. Burgess asked you about Periscope. Does Periscope have a lot of information and data on it?
Yes.
What type, without getting into any specifics, I don't want any specifics, just generally categories. What types of categories of data or information are included in Periscope?
Yeah, I think I covered that earlier, but it includes event performance, how the events are doing, subscribers, viewership, cash flow, specific content, and how they're performing from a subscription and viewership impression perspective, and probably beyond that. I don't personally use it much beyond that.
And how often does this information that FloSports inputs and maintains on Periscope change?
It is updated daily.
Mr. Weiserot, if you could please put Plaintiff's Exhibit 666, which I believe was admitted into evidence earlier. Mr. Wendler, you remember your lawyer asking you about this document, correct?
Yes, sir.
Am I correct that this document shows absolutely no usage of Periscope by Willie Saylor after November 3rd, 2019?
I wouldn't say the document says that. The document ends at November 3rd.
It's true that this document does not show any usage by Mr. Saylor of Periscope after November 3rd, 2019, correct?
It does not, but it does not list November 4th.
Okay,
So
well,
I can't tell from the document if it is it or not.
okay. Put aside the document. Are you aware of Mr. Saylor ever accessing or using Periscope after November 3rd or November 4th, 2019?
I am not aware, no.
Okay. Mr. Weiserot, if you could take that down, please. When is the last time, Mr. Wendler, that you actually spoke to Mr. Saylor?
I can't recall.
Has it been over a year?
Probably. Willie and I are not personal friends, or we didn't communicate much, during the business day either.
Well, he's been gone for over a year, right?
Yes. Not
Okay.
exactly a year,
And
right?
And my follow-up, my question is, you haven't spoken to him since he left, right?
I don't think I have run into Willie Saylor, no.
So you have no knowledge of any statement that he has made to you for the last year, true?
True. I don't think
If
he's made
someone
any statements to
testified,
me.
I'm sorry?
I don't think he's made any statements to me.
Okay. Now, when Mr. Martin Floriani left FloSports, he was upset about that, was he not? Back in 2018?
Yes, he was.
When is, let me back up. If someone testified that Mr. Saylor's social media since he left FloSports has actually helped drive traffic to FloSports, would you agree or disagree?
I can't speak.
Or
to
have
that.
no opinion?
I haven't followed it. I don't know what he's posted or.
Okay. Would you agree with testimony from Mr. Machuca and Mr. Pat Noonan that FloSports' core business is live event streaming?
I'm going to object to assumes facts, not evidence. That is not their testimony.
Objection's overruled. He's asking whether or not he has an opinion about that, as I understood the question. Perhaps I misunderstood it. I'll ask Mr. Soltero to read that.
He was asking him to comment on testimony.
Well, let's
but
get
that's
Mr. Soltero to clarify his question. That's not how I heard it, but there's nuance here. I'll ask Mr. Soltero to re-ask his question.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Wendler, you are Senior Vice President, Global Rights Acquisition and Subscription for FloSports, right?
Mhm.
Is that yes?
Yes, sorry.
Would you agree that FloSports' core business is live event streaming, as has been testified by witnesses before this court, including Mr. Machuca?
I would agree that live event streaming is a big part of our business, but is not the sole driver of revenue or subscribers of our business, and we invest well beyond that.
There may be all kinds of things that the company does, but you agree that the core business is live event streaming, right?
Can you define core for me?
I'm sorry, where did you go to college?
Princeton?
Okay. Do you don't know what the term core means?
I don't know how you're using it here.
Sure. Is a central part of the business live event streaming?
It is.
Okay. Would you agree with the following statement? FloSports' business model relies upon attracting viewers to pay to watch high-profile events and then converting some percentage of those viewers to long-term paid subscribers.
I would agree that we do that and more.
Thank you for your time, sir. I pass the witness.
Ms. Burgess,
I
any
just
other
have
questions?
a few questions. Yes, Your Honor, just a few. If Mr. Saylor went to Caesars Casino and did rankings at, there for wrestling events that were showing, would that be competitive?
It would be.
When was the last time you were asked about investor decks? When was the last time an investor deck was created?
Our last round, I believe, was May of 2019.
Okay, and when did Mr. Saylor leave?
He left in November of 2019.
That September 2019 event that you looked at the press release for, was that the first live wrestling event that you knew about on Rokfin?
It was the first one that I knew about.
So the investor round had already finished by then, or had it?
It was well done, yes.
Now, Mr. Brudico went through at length all sorts of different competitors. How could such a broad range of companies be competitors?
I mean, it's challenging. So if you take a company like Hulu, Hulu is technically owned by Disney, right? And there's a bunch of sides of Disney. Like, we're not competing with Mickey Mouse, right? But we are competing with ESPN and ESPN Plus. And there's other channels at ABC that has sports content that we're competing for. And so it's really, it's hard to break it down. So if you're asking me, are we competing with Disney? Technically, I have to say yes, right? But it's only subsets of those businesses. And again, it's where we're competing for eyeballs for the same sort of content within the same communities or markets.
Does Disney own ESPN now?
Disney owns ESPN, yes.
Okay. And is ESPN one of your main competitors?
ESPN is a big competitor, yes.
Now, do you also partner sometimes with your competitors?
We do.
How is it that you define your competitors?
Yeah, I mean, anytime there's value, there's probably going to be competition, right? That's an organic part of our business. We accept that. But again, it's just when they're offering and pursuing similar or the same content and going after the same audience to monetize. And that monetization doesn't have to be subscription. It can be advertising, right? Every impression drives, for most platforms, has advertising around it. Some platforms rely exclusively on that. Some use subscription, some use a combination of both.
Moving to another point, is Periscope data from a year ago obsolete?
No.
Why not?
Because a lot of these events that happen and some of the content that we cover, it takes place on an annual basis. So it would be very valuable for a year from now because you'd know what's coming up and how valuable it was to our company. And again, how it performed and outside of Periscope, if you had access to it, what our contract structures were like.
I pass the witness.
No questions.
I pass the witness.
He said no questions. It's on to Mr. Soltero.
No questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. May I call your next witness, Ms. Burgess?
Yes, Your Honor. I'll be right back.
Your Honor, before we start with Mr. Machuca, we'd like to just have housekeeping on exhibits.
I can't housekeep without Ms. Burgess being
Understood.
up and ready to go. So let's give her just a minute to get her witness situated and we'll take up your issue. Just so everyone else knows, I admitted Mr. Boucheron because he asked to be admitted into the meeting. As I understand it, he's co-counseling or otherwise assisting Ms. Burgess. And so I've admitted him into the room.
Mr. Boucheron is a paralegal, just so you know.
That's why I said otherwise assisting.
We're moving people around, so we're masked up for just a second, and we'll be, we have some health issues over here, so we're gonna.
Would you spell, well, that's all right, I'll get him to do it when he comes in. While we're waiting for him to come in, Ms. Burgess, if you're ready, Mr. Brudico has a question.
Should I go ahead? I'm
Yes.
going to.
Yeah,
It's not a
okay.
question. It's to respond to your request that we talk about exhibits over the break and for Mr. Machuca. We have not been able to come to a complete list. The initial list that they gave us was 97 exhibits. We obviously didn't have time to do that, but we are working with them, and people on my team are working with people on Ms. Burgess's team. We're just not 100%.
Okay. Well, that's fine. Let me offer a couple of observations with regard to exhibits. One, what I want you now to do over the weekend, if you haven't already done it, I'm assuming you each have exhibit list already prepared, but the court reporters don't have them and I don't have them. So it would be helpful if when you spend some time this weekend talking about these exhibits for you to do a couple of things. I want the plaintiff's exhibit list, and I want, as I understand it now, a joint exhibit list from the defendants. They've agreed to offer their exhibits jointly. So I want a plaintiff's exhibit list and a defendant's exhibit list. I know that we're not trying the case to a jury, but assume for purposes of preparing your exhibit list that we are. So if we were in a jury trial, you'd give me that. You would have given it to me at pretrial, and it would have plaintiff's exhibit number 1, contract, admitted, not admitted, witness, and so forth. And so I'd like very much for you, and you don't have to do it in that sort of spreadsheet format. You can just create a list, but I want to know what exhibit number 1 is, a brief description of that document, and then I'll be able to circle, check mark, highlight, right? I'll be able to use it, but that way we don't all have notes of 27 million exhibits in random places on our notepad. So if each side could please prepare an exhibit list and circulate that not only to each other, but to, and we have 2 court reporters. So please keep in mind, because somebody's asked for daily copy, we have 2 court reporters. So they each need 1. I need 1, and all counsel need 1. And to the extent that you have agreements on them, you can go ahead and indicate on the list you send to us which ones you've agreed to be admitted. That will help everybody, and you can take the weekend to get that done.
Judge, we actually have all provided exhibit lists and exchanged those and provided those to the court reporter too, I think.
Well, maybe, but I don't have one. So if you haven't, do it. If you have, great. If you need to update it, please do. But I don't have anybody's exhibit list. And so if you could please make sure that you send those to me through Mr. McCabe, that would be most appreciated.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Is your next witness ready yet?
Yes. So, and Ray, if you could back your chair up a little bit, because I don't want to be way behind you, but I want to give Katie some space. Okay.
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry. I've got a little bit of an issue on my end. I need to be excused for just a second while you're getting your next witness lined up. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. I have a little distraction on my end. Outside my window here. I am ready. Sir, I don't believe you were sworn in earlier, so if you'll raise your right hand, I'll swear you in at this time. You solemnly swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you will give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, ma'am.
And if you would please state your name and spell your last name for us, please.
My name is Ray Machuca, Machuca.
Very good. Mr. Machuca, a rule of the court has been invoked here in this proceeding and in a very short order. I know that Ms. Burgess has probably talked to you at length about it, but just so you know, you're not allowed to talk about your testimony with anybody except the lawyers. Can't talk about the case with anyone else until you're excused from that rule. That rule applies to all the other witnesses that were sworn in as well, and their lawyers have talked to them about what the rule means. But since you weren't here this morning, I just want to make sure that you heard that as well. Okay, Ms. Burgess, you may proceed.
Would you state your name for the record?
My name is Ray Machuca.
And Mr. Machuca, what do you do for a living?
So I am the Chief Content Officer at FloSports.
How long have you been at FloSports?
I've been at FloSports for 10 years.
Can you tell us your, you already told us your role, but how long have you been in that role?
I've been in this role for 6 years, I believe.
And what does that entail?
So the Chief Content Officer is responsible for all the, creation and publication of digital content or content. For me, that particularly that's editorial content and also film content.
It's getting loud over there. Can you tell the court a little bit about your background? Start with
Ms.
school.
Burgess, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Ms. Burgess, I'm sorry to interrupt. There's some
Yeah.
distraction outside my window and it's still going on. I'll be
Oh,
right back. I'm
We've
sorry.
all been there. Trust me. Okay, no problem.
Hang on one second. Okay, so sorry about that. I'm hoping that that is resolved, but who knows? We'll see. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No problem. Mr. Machuca, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so really quickly, high school, I served overseas in Afghanistan, came back, joined a film program, graduated from that, and just worked at various levels of production, medium-sized companies, my own company for 10 years, and then came to FloSports around 2010. So
thank you for your service.
Mhm.
How are departments structured at FloSports?
So we have 7 departments, 8 departments, I think. So we have content, marketing, there's RAC, there's product engineering, HR, G&A, and I guess operations, which would be production.
And what is RAC?
So RAC, they're the team that is responsible for acquiring and maintaining our rights portfolio to streaming events and also some other smaller events. But
what is your department?
so I run the content department.
And was Saylor in your department?
Yes, so Saylor is in the content department. Content department is about 77 people. We have about 264 employees. So it constitutes about 30% of the company. It's also about 17% of the operational expenses. We have 26 sports. They're called verticals because we're sort of vertically integrated, go deep. We have 26 of them, and Willie started off in the wrestling vertical, which is one of our oldest verticals.
And are all of the verticals, are they all traditionally viewed as sports?
No, there's some that are not sports, like there's voice, there's dance, marching band.
What were the first verticals at FloSports?
I think the first vertical was wrestling, Flow Wrestling. The second was Flow Track, and that's because our co-founders were each track and wrestling athletes
In college?
in college.
What role does content, and before you answer this question, just letting you know that there are 2 really nice ladies taking down all of your testimony.
Mhm.
And so if you talk real fast, it's hard for them to
Got it.
get it. But what role does content play in FloSports' business model?
So content, its job is to hype events and then engage in subscribers with content year round. A lot of companies that try to get into our businesses will do one or the other. They will maybe stream an event, or they will do content, but really, to use a metaphor, flour is valuable and sugar and egg is valuable, but together you have a cake. And so what FloSports does the same thing to our sports, what other media companies do for the big sports. We do the whole package, content, podcast, the whole thing, and content's job is to, contextualize the sport, events, hype them up, make them bigger, and then engage them after the fact so that they always stay and are lifelong subscribers.
And is that important in the communities around the verticals to create those communities?
Yes. So, a lot of our sports are fractured and splintered. And so coming in and galvanizing that sport around a vertical really allows us to apply our model fully. And that's where we get the value.
Do you have a motto around that?
A motto? Well, our catchphrase is "Be there." Is that what you mean? I don't know.
I don't know. I thought you had one around
No.
that. But now, if I'm there to see a wrestling match, why do I care about the content?
So, the example I give is just a couple of weeks ago, Buccaneers are facing off against New Orleans Saints, and my wife walks by and she just thinks, okay, there's 2 guys playing football. But what I see, because I've been following the sport, is Tom Brady, a man in the twilight of his career. He's 41 years old. Is this his last year? He's facing off against Drew Brees, also in the twilight of his year. And so knowing what's at stake and knowing what's about to happen, and this could be the last season, last time they face off, who's going to win? To my wife, the outsider, it's just guys in tights wearing funny hats. To me, there's an actual story going on, and our job is to bring that same, content and experience to our sports that you would expect from the other sports. And
does that help you get subscribers in the off season and seasonal verticals?
Yes. So our model allows us to get content, subscribers all through the year.
Who is Willie Saylor?
So Willie Saylor is a He's a really well-known wrestling content creator.
Do you have talk shows?
Yeah, so at FloSports, so Willie came to FloSports. He came on as a high school ranker. That was his main focus. Pretty early on, he was obviously really talented, really hardworking, very lovable in the community. And so, you know, he very quickly, his role grew from just doing high school rankings to taking a more upfront position in the editorial voice and tone of the site. And then pretty soon, in short order, he was promoted to senior editor. We then, with Martin, we all worked very closely to establish sort of what the content of Flow would be like. And then he just grew and grew and grew, you know, and as the company grew, he grew with it. In the end, he became a managing editor, overseeing our larger verticals. In that role, he was responsible for hiring and firing. He was responsible for, you know, helping me set up editorial practices, and in many ways had a very CEO, GM / role of wrestling and also the sports that were under his stewardship.
Have you seen Mr. Saylor tweet out about when he ran the show at FloSports?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes, yes,
Remember
that's a yes.
these ladies, you're talking real fast, and it's the way, I know it's your nature, but when did Willie Saylor run the show at FloSports?
Day to day, he certainly was, you know, he was responsible for the day-to-day operations for not only wrestling, but these sports under his purview.
Do you know what other sports there were?
For him, wrestling, grappling, softball, others. I'm not really sure. It's been a while. So in the end, he requested, he wasn't happy in a managerial role. He wanted to just not have that responsibility and asked to be, you know, reassigned to strictly a content role. He wanted to focus on high school rankings, and he also wanted to move to Pennsylvania. His parents were he was having some family stuff going on. So,
and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Sure. But let's talk about the kind of content Saylor contributed to Flow Wrestling. And Mr. Weisbrot, if you could, Rod, could you pull up F407A, which is just a demonstrative and not an exhibit we're planning to offer. Did Mr. Saylor, can you go through these and talk about?
Ms. Burgess, just so that we're clear, since it's being displayed, that unless I hear an objection to the demonstrative, I'm assuming there's not one. And so just so Mr. Brutico and Mr. Sotero are clear about that, I'm assuming that you're okay with the demonstrative.
Yes, Your Honor. Our understanding is that it's not meant as an exhibit to be offered into evidence, and that's
correct. Demonstrative only. I just want to make sure, since this is the first time it's come up, that unless I hear an objection, I'm going to let her display it.
Okay. Yes, Your Honor. No objection from Mr. Saylor either.
All right.
So can you talk us through some of the examples of these areas of Mr. Saylor's duties at FloSports?
Yeah. So, you know, at FloSports, he would be involved, you know, very specifically with technique videos, interviews, podcasts and vlogs, written articles and opinion pieces, rankings, obviously, recruiting content. In the service of this content, he would use his monikers and the various terms of art or catchphrases we had developed. And then he didn't just organize events, he was event creator and oftentimes the driver of events. With regard to social media posts, we certainly content does do social media posts. I can't speak to whether or not he's doing that on Rokfin, but all the examples, technique videos, interviews, podcasts, written articles and opinion pieces, rankings, recruiting, the use of monikers, and organizing events, I have seen on Rokfin.
And Willie Saylor, is he still tweeting?
Yes.
Okay. And do those tweets often link to Rokfin?
Yes.
Can you tell me about specifically what's not on here? Well, it is on here, podcasts and vlogs. I believe that Mr. Saylor has not been doing that since the TI. Is that true?
Yes, he has stopped doing the video, the shows, I thought, which is kind of, could be different from podcasts and vlogs, but I believe he has stopped doing the video shows since the TI.
Okay. But when he initially left FloSports, did he do several?
Certainly, yes.
Okay. And otherwise, is there anything that he stopped doing this year to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, no.
Do you know if there are still technique videos from Willie Saylor on Rokfin?
Object to that, Your Honor. Foundation and speculation.
Sustained.
I have seen them on
Well,
Rokfin.
Okay, we'll just ask him.
Okay.
If it's part of your job to know the competitive landscape for FloSports.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
And is that why you know what is on Saylor's Rokfin page?
Yes.
Objection leading.
And
Sustained.
do you know what's on Saylor's Rokfin page generally?
Generally, yes.
And are there technique videos on his Rokfin page?
Yes.
Same objection, Your Honor.
Well, it's not clear if he's seen them. So monitoring is one thing, whether or not he's actually seen this or not, a different thing. So perhaps you could get that clarification.
Sure. Mr. Machuca, have you actually seen technique videos on his Rokfin page?
Yes.
What about, is he still doing written articles and opinion pieces?
Yes.
What about rankings?
Yes.
What about recruiting?
Yes.
Is he still using FloSports monikers?
Yes.
And has he threatened to organize events?
Yes.
When we talk about monikers, can you give me some ideas of those, some examples of those?
You know, greatest mind in wrestling, who's crystal ball rankings, big board. That's the stuff that comes to mind immediately.
Okay, let's talk about the PIIA. So Mr. Weisrod, if you could take us to 160. And in particular, if you would pull out first three, I had a copy of this right here. Okay, you do have one with you. Let's start with the competition paragraph. Is that 3B? 3B. Do you recognize this as Mr. Saylor's non-compete?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and it references his geographic territory. Where was the geographic territory where his talk shows were shown and his opinion pieces were displayed?
It's all over the world. If you have the internet or a cell phone signal, that's the territory.
Okay, is it like Netflix? You can
Yes.
log into your subscription wherever?
You can log into your subscription wherever you have an internet connection or cell service.
And is that true on Rokfin as well?
To my knowledge, yes.
Now let's look at on page 2 at the bottom, Mr. Weisrod, 3.1. Before I get there, does the first section of the non-compete even reference business of the company?
No.
But 2 and 3 do?
Yes.
Let's look at the first sentence here. Can you just read that to yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so we've heard that you referred to the fact that you could change sports video industry to onion in this sentence and it would be have the same meaning. Can you explain that?
Yes, the reason why I said that is Mr. Brudicow was asking me the differences between sports video industry and sports media industry. And I was just, as an example, I'm saying this term is a placeholder for all of our products and services. The thing we do, we are calling this. And so it really doesn't, that's establishing the business of the company. So that's why I said that.
So you, FloSports and Mr. Saylor acknowledge and agreed that the company is engaged in providing products and services in the sports video industry. What does that tell you the sports video industry means?
Your Honor, I object. The document speaks for itself.
Well,
We spent a lot of time.
excuse me, he's not asking what you might think it means. She's asking what he thinks it means to him.
Okay.
So I will ultimately decide matters related to the breach or not of this contract, but he can certainly tell me his opinion of how he understands these words. Go ahead.
Okay, so do you think the sports video industry is well defined here?
To me, yes.
Okay, and what does it mean to you?
It means that the products and services that FloSports is doing falls under the bucket of sports video industry.
And what was FloSports doing in 2014 when this agreement was signed?
It was putting sports content, wrestling content in this instance, behind a paywall.
Okay, and particularly what was Willie Saylor doing?
He was creating sports content, wrestling content, rankings and recruiting and opinion pieces and podcasts and technique videos and interviews and general coverage and launching or at least shepherding events. So this basically what he's doing right now on Rokfin.
And was what he was doing part of the products and services that were the business of the company?
It certainly was.
Now, let's go to 3D. Now, in addition to a non-compete, did Mr. Saylor have a non-solicit, an agreement not to solicit your customers?
Yes, he did.
And who are customers at FloSports?
Any fan of a sport that we are actively, or competition that we are actively in, I guess.
And subscribers would be a subset of that?
Yeah, so that's what I mean. If you're a customer of ours, if you are a subscriber, you could also be a customer of ours, a potential customer of ours, because we do, advertising content. So if you're interested and a participant and watcher, consumer of the sports competition content that we create, then I would consider you a customer.
Okay. On Rokfin, how do they monetize their content?
It's
Section Foundation.
Sustained?
Do you follow Rokfin in order to know the competitive landscape?
I do.
And in order to see premium content on Rokfin, what do you have to do?
You have to pay a subscription, an ongoing subscription.
And how much is that subscription?
I don't remember. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I believe it's $9.99. I'm sorry, I really can't remember.
And do you know if you pay that to Rokfin or if you pay it to like Mat Scouts or PA Power Wrestling?
Actually, I don't know. I would assume it's Rokfin. I haven't looked at my billing information.
Now, did Mr. Saylor, after signing this agreement, did he receive proprietary information and trade secrets from FloSports?
Yes.
And I was going to use the flip chart for this part. Do you have it? Did did he also later receive stock options?
Yes.
Is we heard yesterday that Mr. Saylor has an encyclopedic memory for wrestling. How can you keep things from like going with him in his head?
I cannot keep things from going. I can't keep things out of Willie's head.
So what do you do as a company instead?
So all of our data and content, we have them sign NDAs, we have them sign PIIAs. We, make sure that that data and content and general stuff is password protected. And then we have various levels of security based on your role and at the company.
With regard to the PIIA, is that why you asked them not to compete for a year or require them not to compete for a year?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
Technically, yes, but of no consequence. Let's move on.
Now, can you tell me what categories of FloSports proprietary information and Saylor received?
So
And trade secret Saylor received, sorry.
Yeah, so number one, I would say data in general. That data would include Periscope data. This Periscope is the visualization of our data warehouse. It's basically the visualization of the nerve center of the business. Other data includes Stripe, which is, actual customer payment information like emails and credit card. Also Google Analytics, which is historical web traffic, also geographic information.
Wait, you're gonna have to slow down. I can't write this fast. Also, I want to be able to ask you some questions about these things.
Sure.
Okay, so we got data, and you said Periscope is what?
It's a visualization software for all of our data. All of our data
Oh, okay.
ties into Periscope and it visualizes it.
So is that where you see the dashboards?
That's where the dashboards are, yes.
Okay, and what do you learn from the dashboards?
So anything, we have hundreds and hundreds of dashboards. So everything from current subscriber count, monthly, yearly blend, acquisition channels, average conversion value, lifetime value, cash, events, forecasts, viewership, engagement data, traffic. If anyone has a question, they ask the business intelligence team and they will create the dashboard, and that dashboard will live in Periscope.
Now, how did Willie Saylor use Periscope?
So Willie Saylor would use Periscope to see, how events are doing, what events are coming up, what the forecasts are for events.
What do you mean forecast?
I'm sorry, what the subscriber forecast for an event would be. He would use it to make general content decisions and content plans. If you're going to invest in a vertical, a sport, you would look at Periscope to see how it's doing and, make business decisions. It drives all of the business decisions for FloSports.
And in particular, the comprehensive attribution dashboard, what does that tell you?
So comprehensive attribution is sort of kind of what it means. It's comprehensive. It's meant to say, it's basically the most important information someone needs to know. We try to have it in a central location. So that's over any time frame, subscribers count, cash, year-over-year performance, blend, monthly to yearly mix, all the content, how that content performed, all the events, how the events performed from a sign-up perspective, viewership perspective, engagement perspective.
And did you all refer to this as another name sometimes internally?
Yes, it was Neptune for a long time.
And did you hear Mr. Martin Floriani, talk about the proprietary nature of Periscope and Neptune?
Yes, not only did Martin, but everybody on the SLT, every executive, every
We don't know what
VP,
SLT means.
everyone on the senior leadership team would speak about the preciousness of the data on Periscope and its importance to the company. One example, I remember in particular, we had an employee who was responsible for a lot of the early building in Neptune or Periscope, was poached away to Amazon. And we were all really upset that he was leaving. And, you know, I told Martin, well, he signed a non-compete, and Martin he said that, yeah, but he's walking out the door with millions of dollars of equity in his head.
And that's because of Periscope or Neptune?
That's just because the negative know-how, the learning, all the work that's done into it, and just the time spent on the dashboard.
So would you be able to view the Google Analytics through Periscope, or is this separate?
It's separate. You can, but it's not as robust. It is. Stripe should be viewed as separate. Google Analytics should be looked at as separate.
And so what would you use those for separately?
So Stripe, Stripe has actual payer information. So, you know, you could look at it. You could look at Stripe and see events and signups, but also, you know, email addresses, credit card information. It's basically like a dumber version of Periscope. Periscope pulls the data out of Stripe, but sometimes, you know, there's data problems or data goes down or Stripe is faster. So you pull up Stripe and you can check daily subscriber information by looking at Stripe.
And what about Google Analytics?
So Google Analytics is a visualization tool that allows you to look at historical web traffic for any of our verticals, any of our sports, not only historical web traffic, but where that traffic's coming from, where that traffic's located, what they're watching, what they're looking at, just the smorgasbord of data.
How do these items drive your decisions at FloSports?
So, you know, if we're in these things, you know, we're data informed. And so this is the information we use to make business decisions.
Does it
Data.
tell you what makes people want to click or subscribe or engage?
It's how you get at that stuff. You do a piece of content, you look at how it performed, you look at when you put it up, you compare things, you see an event, you see how one event did. It's the thing by which you make decisions, all of our business decisions, not just daily, but in the future.
Okay, so that's one area of trade secrets. I'm gonna have to write smaller, I think, after this.
Probably.
What other trade secrets and proprietary information did Mr. Saylor have access to?
I think probably number 2 is, financial and LTV marketing data. That's really, I'm waiting for you to write.
Sorry.
So, LTV would be, it's really a subset of a lot of these in the data warehouse, but it's important enough that it's worth calling out as its own line item. LTV is an initialism for lifetime value. LTV represents the future cash flow we can expect from a subscriber. That data is, if we had a formula for Coke, that's what it would be. It's very complicated. It changes a lot. There's a lot of things that can change it.
I'm sorry.
Seasonality and
Can I interrupt for a second? Your Honor, I'm very sorry. Mr. Soltero is off the internet.
I heard a beep, but I couldn't figure out where it was coming from, and I think it was Mr. Soltero leaving the meeting. There he is. He's coming back. Let's just give him a minute to reconnect here. He's
I
back.
apologize, Your Honor. I got kicked off the internet.
No worries. He's back. Let's go.
Again, we've all been there.
Just so you know that the last thing I heard was she's asking him questions about what's available on Periscope and what was called Neptune. And last couple of things he talked about were financial data and LTV. Go ahead.
Okay, and did Mr. Saylor have access to those?
Yes, specifically, comprehensive attribution will show you, the average conversion value, and there's various dashboards or in Periscope that would reflect LTVs. You have the LTV of all of our verticals. And so that's really the cornerstone of our business. If we had a Coke, that would be the formula for Coke.
Now, what about, did he have access to salaries and personnel information?
Yes, so as a managing editor, he had access to personnel information, just the type of information you'd expect from a manager to have, salary information for all of our different individual contributors and roles and managerial roles.
Did I spell personnel right? I think I did. Okay, what about,
He would also,
oh, yes, go ahead.
yeah, he would also have, just in his role as a managing editor, and especially his relationship with me and Martin Floriani, Mr. Floriani, he would have access to, access to term deals and media deals for our rights holders. He would know, per se, how long a contract is, what the deliverables for that contract are. He would know how that event performs. He would know, generally speaking, if there were other kickers or other information that drove enterprise value into that right.
And is that something that if a competitor had it, would be dangerous to FloSports?
It certainly would. You would not want that information to be readily available to any competitor. If they knew that information, particularly in conjunction with 1, 2, and 3, you can short circuit our sales process. You can underbid, you can outbid, you know what's important to somebody. You can know vulnerabilities and weaknesses, and yeah.
And what about rankings, spreadsheets, and analysis and recruitment?
Yeah, so all of this is sort of data and general intelligence. The biggest thing was just the body of work that Saylor produced over his 8 years at FloSports. It is 8 years of data, rankings, content, ideas, and names, and analysis. It's basically what I did is he's a really hard worker, and I paid him to sit in a chair, headphones on, usually dipping, but for 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, do ranking, recruitment, or wrestling content 7 days a week, 8 hours a day for 8 years. And so all that is, written down and tabulated in his various spreadsheets.
And were these kept on the FloSports system?
Yes.
Did you also in this send Mr. Saylor around the country or the world?
Yeah, so,
Objection, Your Honor, almost every question now is leading.
I can ask a different question. How did you invest in Mr. Saylor? Judge, I didn't mean to.
That's all right, go
interrupt you.
ahead.
I was just going to take. Okay. How did you invest in Mr. Saylor with regard to travel?
So, really to bring all of this stuff to life, we basically spared no expense to make sure all of our content team, Willie Saylor in particular, was, at the forefront and in the thick of it in the wrestling world. So we sent him anywhere in the world, any state, to, conduct interviews or watch sporting events or, general reportage and coverage of our sports. It's really, that's one of the things we do with our individual contributors, is put them in a position to constantly be building on their content, building on their brand. It's yes. I don't know if I have anything else to add. I'm like,
Would any of these be available if you didn't have a password?
No, none of this. No. So, we have, 1Password, password authenticator, so that, no one can get into any of this stuff.
And do all of the folks who have access to this have NDAs?
Yes,
Do they also have non-competes if they work at FloSports?
yes,
Would all of these give a competitive advantage if given to a competitor?
yes.
I'm gonna take this down for a second. I can see. And let's talk about that specifically. Let's talk about the travel. Let's go to 523. Can you identify this document?
This is an export of Willie's reimbursement receipts.
Okay, and it's an export from what?
I believe it'd be Concur, which is our, travel management software.
And is this a regularly kept record at FloSports?
Yes,
And is it made at or near the time of the event by someone with personal knowledge?
yes.
I move for admission of 523.
No objection.
Your Honor, my objection would be relevance. Not sure what his travel reimbursements have to do with anything in this case.
Frankly, I'm a little confused about that myself. I mean, and I don't know what period of time it covers. So is it his travel for the entirety of his employment at FloSports? And if so, why would that be relevant? Is it just the last few months before he left that this relates to, and therefore maybe it's more relevant to what he might or might not have been doing leading up to his departure? But I just don't have any context for the relevance of this one.
Sure, it shows that FloSports invested over $80,000 sending him around the world. So it goes both to geographic scope and also to the investment in him, the consideration of the that was given for the PIIA.
Well, I'm not sure that it does either of those things, but I'll overrule the objection because I think it goes more to the weight that it might be given rather than to its admissibility, Mr. Soltero. So your objection's overruled. Plaintiff's Exhibit 523 is admitted.
Okay, and what time period does this cover, Mr. Machuca?
I believe this is the last 2 years of his employment.
And how much did FloSports spend sending Mr. Saylor around the country and the world during that time period?
In this time period, it's around $80,000.
I think you're gonna have to speak up just a little bit.
In this time period, $80,000.
Did you also pay him salary?
Yes.
Okay, and tell us about his salary. And I don't know if the opposition wants to go off of the internet for this, or whether whether we should go forward talking about his salary.
Your Honor, I think I would say if there's going to be a time when we go off the YouTube anyway, perhaps this would be better addressed then. So we'd prefer that, but
That's fine with me. It doesn't matter to me. We're going to take a break at about 2:15 to give the court reporter a rest. So we can talk about it then if you want.
Great, thank you. Did you also promote Mr. Saylor and his content?
Yes. So we, took considerable measures to make sure that, we put marketing muscle behind his content and his brand and his image. In particular, it's important here because, there was a time when there was some discussion between Mr. Floriani and myself, whether or not we should be promoting their personal Twitter handles out front. And I thought that was really important. I thought we should be investing in them and building up their brand. People connect with people. And so it is very valuable for us to put Mr. Saylor's Twitter handle or social media credentials in shows, on content, wherever he can, so that, you know, as he gets bigger, you know, that raises our tide as well.
And did you actually do that?
Yes. Yes.
How did that investment in Mr. Saylor's brand affect his Twitter followers?
Object, Your Honor, that calls for speculation. He's not an expert. He doesn't know causation.
I sustain the objection. Don't need
Mr.
any objections, by the way. Just if I need further argument, I'll invite you all to make argument. But otherwise, if you could just state the basis for your objection and the grounds, I'll rule. Go ahead.
Understood, Your Honor.
Mr. Weisbrod, could you take down the exhibit? So how many Twitter followers did Willie Saylor have when he first joined FloSports?
Around 100.
And how many did he have when he left?
Around 22,000.
Let's talk about Mr. Saylor's move to Pennsylvania. You briefly mentioned that earlier. Can we go to 286, Mr. Weisbrod?
Sorry, did you say 286?
Yes, F286. And can you identify this document?
Yes, this is an email between Willie and myself about, you know, the next.
Wait. And what's the date?
I can't see the date. April 23rd, 2018.
Okay. I'm going to move for admission of F286.
Looking at it. Yeah, I don't have an objection.
No objection, Your Honor.
Plaintiff's exhibit number 286 is admitted.
So tell me about, and you can take down the exhibit, Mr. Weisbrod, but Mr. Machuca, can you tell us about this talk that you had and what was going on?
Just, you know, quickly, Willie was not happy in his role as a manager at FloSports anymore. It can be really just taxing and stressful. He said he was happier just being an individual content creator. On top of that, he had some family members going through some health issues. He wanted to be closer to them in Pennsylvania. I thought, okay, you know, we at FloSports, we're very we want people to be doing what they're happiest doing. So I told him that since I'd be taking many responsibilities off his plate, I would have to find some other creative way to make sure that he was incentivized to be doing the best work of his life if he wanted to continue to be earning the salary he was earning. He was fine with that. I also thought it would just be a mutual benefit. Pennsylvania is a hotspot of wrestling. And so maybe it'll be good. He can focus on what he wants to do, be near his family and failing health. And he can also, you know, cover wrestling in the Northeast, and that's a hotspot. So I thought it was a good deal.
And so what was the creative way you came up to compensate him?
So what I did, I just leveraged what I thought would probably be half his salary to performance. So I gave him a base, very modest base. We worked together on what he thought he could drive in subscription revenue. And we came up with, you know, a price, $1 per subscription, paid out quarterly. And it was our mutual belief that he would be making very, very close to what he was making year one, definitely by year two. And we were hoping that he would be able to actually exceed that and do more, given how close he was to so much wrestling in Pennsylvania.
And without talking about specific numbers, did he basically make the same amount the first year that he had made before?
It was really close, yes.
And did he still have access to all the items that we listed out on the chart?
Yes, he did.
Did he continue as a W-2 employee?
Yes.
And did he continue working on Flow Wrestling Live or Flow Radio Live?
Flow Radio Live, yes,
As well as the other shows?
Yes, he did.
Did he have the same tasks that he had other than management before?
Yes.
What did you do to help him get set up in Pennsylvania?
We bought the equipment. I sent someone up there to set it up for him, make sure it was done right. That's what we did.
Now, how much did you spend on equipment? Do you know?
I'm sorry, I don't.
Okay. But you sent an employee for that?
Yes.
Did you still send him all over the world?
I sent him everywhere he wanted to go.
Why?
Yes.
Why? It strikes me as strange. Why Croatia? Why do they go to Croatia?
That's another wrestling. It's like the, it's like Pennsylvania of the Russian Caucasus.
Okay.
There's a lot of wrestling there.
And Judge, I'm moving to a new topic, and you said 2:15, so I thought I would mention that right now.
Okay. Thank you. We will be in recess for 15 minutes so that we can give the court reporter a break. If you want to just stick around for just a minute, I can have my staff put you in chambers if you need to talk about this issue of the salary. Otherwise, perhaps we could just take it up when we're taking up other matters that are.
That's fine. It's just to get it in the record. It's not to. And the other, we will need to be in a breakout room for when we get into the ranking spreadsheets that Mr. Saylor took with them from FloSports. And so.
Is that going to be something that Mr. Machuca is going to testify about?
Yes, he's our corporate rep. So he's looking at them on the FloSports website or the FloSports system and showing what's the same and what's changed.
Well, since he's your corporate rep, that means he's likely to be around for the duration of the trial. So we can do it today, but we don't have to do it today since he's going to be around anyway. It's not like we're going to lose him in terms of availability.
Your Honor, I think their corporate rep is Mr.
Sorry?
I think their corporate rep is Mr. Hurdlow.
Right. Under the rule, our corporate rep is Mr. Hurdlow because he's the general counsel and is helping with the litigation. So Mr. Machuca has not been following, has not been on the live stream and has not been following that. But our general counsel is not our corporate rep for testimony. That would be improper.
So my point simply is Mr. Machuca is not going anywhere. And so if we're trying to accommodate schedules, we don't have to worry about that because he's going to be available. So we could do it this afternoon or we could do it next week. I'm simply saying that you all should confer about that so that when we are not live streaming, we are efficiently taking care of things that don't have to be live streamed as a group, as opposed to coming back and forth and, kind of doing it in some more sort of whack-a-mole way, if you will, or
Sure.
jack and box perhaps is more a positive way to think about that.
Absolutely. Okay.
So you all can confer about that. It doesn't matter to me, but I'd like to be efficient about that. And since he's going to be around, I don't know that we have to worry about accommodating his schedule